Alrighties. So let's shift on into the money and finance segment. So I've got some updates for other forms of money, and as we've discussed in the past, the Australian dollar is just a currency, and its value can be judged against other currencies such as gold. And the Aussie dollar did well this week, rising 2.5% against gold, but that's only a week. Silver was roughly flat, and Bitcoin was up 2% against the Aussie dollar to 180,000, having got to 188,000 during the week. And remember, Bitcoin started at basically nothing. What was it, 2008, I think? So it's risen rather a lot against the dollar, and the Aussie dollar's fallen against gold over time and silver over time as well. And we've talked about those in the past.
Yep. Interesting.
They're just alternate forms of money. And if you listen to Mike Maloney, the Aussie dollar is not money, it's a currency. And the reason it's not money is because it doesn't fulfill one of the three functions of money, and that is to store value. And as we've discussed in the past, in my lifetime, the Australian dollar's lost 95% of its value, which means it's not money, it's currency. And it's lost money because governments keep printing it, and that devalues it.
Yep.
Anywho, let's not have that discussion again this week. But there are two big financial stories this week. One of them, which was nearly a week ago, we just missed it for last week's show, was that the Reserve Bank has deemed that the interest rate will go down. And they cut the official interest rate by 0.25% during the week. And that's great for borrowers. So if you've got a mortgage, that's fantastic because the interest you're paying on your mortgage just went down. But if you've got investments which are paid in a percentage, if you've got money in the bank or whatever that pays you a percentage, well, you've lost because the interest rate on your savings went down. So if you've got money in the bank, you're worse off. And if you've got a mortgage, you're better off. But none of that particularly, I don't really want to talk about that. What I want to ask is, who says that the Reserve Bank has the right to tell me on a month-to-month basis what the price of borrowing money is? Who gave them that power, and who says? If I borrow money from a bank, what's the Reserve Bank got to do about it? Why do they get to say one month that the amount of interest charge is higher or lower? Who gave them that power?
That's an interesting question, Bruce. I'm pretty sure you're going to cover it for us.
I'm going to cover it. And to answer that, firstly, I'm just going to take a little detour here, and I'm going to just look at the history of money. What is money, how did it develop, and what is it? So money is what we call an intermediate good. It was something that you put in the middle of a barter transaction to let you separate that transaction off in time and space. Because before money was invented, you had what's called the coincidence of wants problem with barter. So if I've got 3 chickens and I want a goat, in order to get that goat, I've got to be in the same place at the same time as someone else who's got a goat and wants 3 chickens. So I've got to have reciprocal wants in place at the same time in the same place. And that's not particularly likely. So that was a huge problem with barter. It made it incredibly inefficient. So money was invented as an intermediate good, something you could put in the middle. So the person with 3 chickens could swap them for money at one point in space and time. And the person with the goat could swap that for money somewhere else. And then that transaction could be separated because the money could be swapped somewhere else at another time. So money was an intermediate good to put in the middle of a barter transaction to store the value in time and space. And over time, many things were trialled as, what can we use as this intermediate good called money? And all sorts of things were tried, wheat, salt, shiny, large rocks, think Easter Island, diamonds, There are all sorts of things were tried. And the free market, having experimented with lots of things, decided that the best thing that would fulfill that function was gold and silver. So the free market invented gold and silver as the intermediate good called money that let you make your barter transactions more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
when
why
you
he
think about
called his channel Gold and Silver, wasn't it? His YouTube channel, his platform, Maloney was. It's called Gold and Silver, isn't
it, goldsilver.com, I think, and yeah,
it?
highly
Yeah.
recommend his
Nice. Brilliant.
his Hidden Secrets of Money, I think it was called,
Yeah,
YouTube.
it was. Yeah, nine-part series. I think we shared it. I did a bit of a Substack on that once. Him and others that were talking into it. Yeah, it's good.
Fantastic. If you have not seen it, log off now and go and look at Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money thing. You get far more value out of that than you will out of us in the next hour or so.
But anyway, if you choose to, you can hang around and just write down,
Yep. For
Mike
those
Maloney.
of you who are left, those few of you who I didn't just flip
There's
off,
one or two.
if you think about it, what is money? Money is stored work, or you can call it stored energy. So if you understand that money is stored work, then you understand that gold and silver self-regulate. Because when money was gold and silver, you had to put work into digging them up. So if you wanted to make money, you had to get your shovel out and dig up gold or silver. And that took a lot of work. And because it took work, it self-regulated. So if too many people went out prospecting, panning, digging for gold or silver, and they found too much, then the supply went up, which meant the value went down, which meant some of those people went, it's not worth doing anymore. I'll go, I've got a shovel. I'll go and do something else with it. I'll dig ditches, I'll dig foundations, I'll dig copper, whatever. So when money was a real thing that took work or energy to produce, then it self-regulated. So you didn't have to have some sort of central authority that controlled it. And when money was self-regulating, because it was a proof of work system, for centuries, the value of money regulated itself with very minimal changes. So if you have a look here, during the medieval period, over more than 100 years, the inflation rate was 1%. Now, that means that your money lost value at 1% a year for a century. Now, following that, we had the Renaissance, and we had another best part of 200 years where the inflation rate was actually minus 0.3%. So again, your money virtually held its value there for 3 centuries. Then we had plus 1.5 during the next era from the 1600s. We had minus 0.6 for another 100 years during the Enlightenment. We had plus 1.5 in the 1800s. We had minus 0.7 in the Victorian era. So over, what is that? So 1800, 1200, over 600 years, the price of money, the inflation virtually was steady for 600 years, 6 centuries. But something changed in the modern era. So something changed in our lifetime in the 20th century. Because we all know that inflation rates of minus we've never heard of, and even plus 1%, you wouldn't hear of that, So we're more used to inflation rates of 10% some years, 5% other years. So something changed in the last century, which took away that self-regulating monetary stability. And what was it? Well, it was the severance of the work function for money. So prior to that, if you wanted money, you had to work for it. You had to embed energy in it to dig it up. And in 1971, that all ended, although there were some cracks in the system beforehand, but let's not discuss them for clarity. But in 1971, Richard Nixon basically took the US dollar off what's called the gold standard. So instead of money being gold up until 1971, after 1971, money became paper. And because of Bretton Woods in 1944, every other currency in the world was linked to the US currency, which meant pretty much the entire world ran on a gold equals money standard. But in 1971, Nixon took the world off the gold standard by taking the US off the gold standard. So he said at that point that all of a sudden, temporarily, I might add, that he was severing the link between the dollar and gold. Okay, so why did he do that after 600 years of price stability? Why did he suddenly decide to do that in 1971? Well, he did it because he wanted to be able to print money rather than work for money. His government wanted to print money. Prior to that, if you wanted money, you had to have gold, you had to dig it up. You couldn't print gold. But after 1971, if the government wanted money, they could just print it. And in fact, anyone could print money, except it was illegal for anyone except the government. It's called counterfeiting. So let's just say that the government was the only one who was allowed to print money.
Counterfeit.
And of course, the governments have been happily, merrily doing that ever since. So for the last 50 odd years, they've been printing money. Now, as a result of that, because there's no work related, they could overprint. They could increase the money supply much faster than was necessary for stability, which is what they did. And that happened across the world. And I've arrowed there in what happened in 1971 compared to what had happened for the, 2.5 centuries previously. So money had been more or less stable in value for centuries. And then in 1971, it just hockey sticked up. And that was because all of a sudden money wasn't linked to gold and silver anymore. Money was linked to paper and you can just print it. So in effect, what happened is governments took over the money supply instead of the free market taking over the money supply. So prior to that, like I said, the free market regulated the supply of money because if too many people did it, then value fell and people stopped doing it. Now, once governments took over the supply of money and they could just print it at will rather than actually work for it, they had to have some sort of system for limiting overprinting. Now, we know how well that's worked because they have overprinted it. But what they did in the US and Australia and elsewhere around the world is they set up a central bank system where one of the jobs of the central bank was to control the money supply. So it was no longer the free market controlling the money supply. It was the central bank controlling it. And the way they do that is through interest rates. So if the money supply goes up, then they raise interest rates, which makes it more difficult to borrow money, more expensive to borrow money. And so that would put a downward limit on it again. So higher interest rates equals less money, lower interest rates equals more money. And that's the system that they use to control the money supply rather than the free market. And we've had that in Australia, in the US, at least since the 70s. It's a bit semantic about when it really started to happen. So here in Australia, we've got a central government body called the Reserve Bank, whose job is to control the money supply. And they aim to control the money supply such that prices only rise 2 to 3% a year. That's called the inflation rate. And they do that by putting the interest rate up and down. But even if they're only increasing the money supply 2 to 3% a year, which they control, remember, it's not the free market anymore, it's the government controlling the money supply. If they're telling you they want an inflation rate of 2 to 3% a year, remember, going back in history, for 600 years, it was less than 1% on average. So they want to triple that. And what they're telling you is that they actually want to steal 2 to 3% of the value of your money every year, because that's what inflation is. It's a loss of purchasing power of the money. And 2 to 3% doesn't sound like much, but if you do some numbers on it, it's actually a hell of a lot. So if the inflation rate is 3%, top end of the 2 to 3% target, that means every 23 years, the value of your money halves. But as we've discussed before, the government lies about what the inflation rate is, and it's much more than they admit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if it's 5% every year, then they steal half the value of your money in 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's 10% a year, they steal half the value of your money in 7 years.
Yeah, which you've broken down quite well in previous episodes. Yeah.
Many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
So inflation steals value from your money, and it's the government that's doing it because they're the ones that control the money supply. So they're actually stealing value from you. They're taxing you, in effect. So inflation is a tax. Okay, now I said a bit earlier that the Reserve Bank has been given the job of controlling the money supply using inflation, interest rates going up or down. But when you think about it, what is the interest rate? The interest rate is actually the rental price of money. So the Reserve Bank is actually setting prices. It's setting the rental price of money. Now, in any other industry, if you set a price, if you fix a price fixing, that's illegal because it harms consumers, and we actually have an ACCC to stop that. Nevertheless, because governments now control the money supply, governments via the Reserve Bank also control the rental price of money. And that's why we sort of breathlessly wait every month or two and see what the new rental price of money is deemed to be by the Reserve Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a few problems with that. One is that there is no single price of money. There's no single price of anything. You know, if I go down to the service station down the road here and I want to buy a litre of petrol, it's $1.65. That's what it says on the board, because there, at that point in time, at that place, that's what the vendor will sell it to me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the price everywhere. If I go to England, I can't buy a litre of petrol for $1.65. It costs me a lot more.
Mm.
And if I'm on the refugee road out of Baghdad with, the forces of darkness coming in, and I'm driving my car and the fuel gauge is on empty, and I'm thinking I would give everything for 20 litres of fuel, one jerry can, so I can make another 200 kilometres and get out of this place and save my family. What do you think the price of petrol is there on that road? Might be $1,000. Who knows? Might be more. So there is no single price of money. So to have the Reserve Bank, which is a quasi-government entity, setting a single price doesn't work because there is no single price. That's the first problem. Now, the second problem is that even if there was a single price for money, the government doesn't know what it is. There's not. But even if there was, they don't know what it is. Because how do you find out prices? The free market sets prices by experimenting. I'm selling my Land Cruiser at the moment, and I'm experimenting with the price that I'm asking and seeing how many people ring up and want it. I don't know actually what it's worth because I only know what it's worth when somebody makes an offer.
Yeah.
And the third problem is politics. Even if both of those things were true, politics gets in over the top. The government is not independent. It's getting pressure all the time from all sorts of people, from voters, from industry, etc. So there are three reasons why the government can't set the price of anything, let alone the price of money, which is, of course, the most important price in the entire economy. And yet they do. And yet every month we breathlessly wait and see what the deemed new price for money is.
Yep.
And here's an example why there is no single price for anything. Let's look at car insurance. So when I buy car insurance, I'm selling my risk to the insurance company. They're buying it for me for a certain price, and the price they're buying it from has got to be, they've got to have a profit margin. So if they say, we calculate that the risk of you losing your car in a given year is $1,000, they're probably going to charge me $1,200, so they make a profit. But the price of me having a total loss of my car is different to the price of someone else having a total loss of their car. Is the insurance quote for a alcoholic who's already crashed their car 3 times and has no license, is that the same as me who's got an excellent driving record and hasn't written a car off in decades? No, it's not. There are different prices. So that just it gives you an example of why there is no single price for anything.
Yep.
And yet, of course, when the Reserve Bank sets the interest rate, they are setting a single price. And when you think about it, if my business is renting money to people, call it a mortgage, then some people are better customers than others. You know, some people are more likely to burn their house down or default on their loans than others. So some people should be charged a different price to rent money, you call it borrowing, than others. There is no single price. And like I said, even if there was, the government doesn't know what it is. And even if they do know what it is, they don't care, because they only care what the voters and all the other, you know, agents who petition them about it have to say.
Yeah, exactly right.
The idea that the government can control the rental price of money is stupid. It's not possible. And this is the third point, which I've already made, which is, look, even if they did know what the price was and it was a single price, they don't care about that. They only care what the voters and all the interest groups say.
Yeah, exactly right. And then on top of that, now they want to take more of your money, because I see a report, I hope I'm not gazumping you, is that 2 economists have called on the government to consider taxing the family home ahead of the government's economic roundtable.
And I'm going to mention the economic roundtable, but I won't give you a gazump strike there, because you haven't quite done.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
I'll get a pass. I'll keep my job.
I haven't actually conceded that you've still got your job, by the way.
Okay, still in by a string. But just before you move on a bit, I just did want to just share this, and people can go and check this out. I did put a Substack together quite a while ago. I think I did flash it up, Global Financial Manipulation, and that actually does have a link to Mike Maloney's Money versus Currency. But I also shared quite a bit else in that for people if they want to check out other stuff that I've found, because I was doing research after talking to you, obviously, and gaining information and stuff. That there's a few links in there that people might find interesting. The Great Taking documentary as well, Century of Enslavement, Fiat Empire. Yep. So there's a bit in that. So if people want to suss that out, you can just go to my Substack and into the search field, just punch in Global Financial Manipulation, and you'll get all those links. But look, if you don't want to do that, obviously, just jump straight onto YouTube and look for Mike Maloney. So there's obviously no requirement to go to my Substack, but there's just some links on there.
Yep. If you didn't already jump out and go to Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money earlier, you should do it now. I'll wait for you.
That's it. Till midnight.
So part of that rant is what I was saying there, is that when the Reserve Bank, which is a quasi-government institution, and I say that because whilst they are so-called independent, they have a set of parameters they work to, which are set by government, so they're not independent. So every month or bi-monthly, whatever it is, the Reserve Bank tells us what the rental price of money is, in other words, price fixing. And for any other industry, price fixing is illegal. You know, Hungry Jack's and McDonald's and Subway can't all get together and say, hey, next month we're going to set the price of burgers and we'll jack it up 20% so we make more profit. That's illegal, because that's called price fixing, and it's illegal because it harms consumers. And yet the government, via the Reserve Bank, price fixes the price of money, and the ACCC doesn't care. The single most important price in the economy is fixed by the government, and that hurts us.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as discussed multiple times, one of the jobs of the Reserve Bank is to maintain price stability. Yeah, good luck with that. In other words, to limit inflation. But they lie about inflation anyway. The government lies through their teeth about what the real inflation rate is. And the way you work out the real inflation rate is you look what real prices do over time. And rather than just asking, okay, what is the CPI, which is the government's official figure? Well, let's look at other measures of inflation. And there are multiple measures of real world inflation. So if you look at my gold index, that tells you that at least over a 20-year period, the real inflation rate's been 11%, because gold is another form of money. And the gold price has gone up compound 11% a year for more than 20 years. You can also look at my favourite pine lime splice index, and we've got it there. And as I've said, I remember as a kid in the early 70s, desperately scraping up 17 cents so I could buy a pine lime splice. And in that graphic, it was actually 10 cents. So that must be before 1973, which is my earliest memory. Nevertheless, 17 cents in the 70s up to $3.70 now, which is what it is. Guess what? If you plug those numbers into a compound interest calculator, that is a 10% interest rate over 52 years. There's that 10% number again. So I think the real inflation rate is 10%, not the 2 to 3% that governments admit.
Yeah. Well, they cook the books. They're the biggest book cookers around. They want come after little fellas and people that are just trying to do their bit and earn a quid, and they cook in the books all the time. They're bloody corrupt mongrels with our money, mate. With our money.
Also known as governments lie all the time about everything. Have I mentioned that in the past? I can't remember.
Just a couple of times, mate. And we're not even talking about shrinkflation either now, are we? Am I gazumping you there? Because we've talked about shrinkflation before too, haven't we?
That's not going to come up. And for those who don't know, shrinkflation is where items get smaller to hide the fact that the prices got higher. So, your pack of Wheaties, which used to be 570 grams, might look the same but only have 370 in it. So, yeah, that's yet another way of hiding.
Yep.
And during the week, I had a minor disaster here at the ranch, and I'm sad. Okay, so
I was wondering whether you're going to talk about this one. I was wondering whether you're going to bring it up, the old musket.
Here's the minor disaster. So I in 6-year-old kid fashion, I managed to just turn and knock over a full glass of musket into the keyboard of my laptop. And I mean, I absolutely bloody drenched it. It's like, oh my God. And I jumped up and turned it over and shook it out and all that. But immediately I found that the microphone stopped working and the speaker stopped working, like instantly. And I did a bit of the Googles, and I rang my son, who's an electronics engineer, and said, this is what's happened. And both the Googles and my son went, not good. So when I spilt musket into the keyboard, the musket ran down into the innards of the machine, and it shorted out some of the electronics, which killed the microphone and the camera instantly. But the risk was that damage was going to get worse over time, because musket has got sugar in it and it's got acid in it, and I'd already had some damage, and that was going to get worse. Was that
you and the machine, mate? Was that you and the machine?
Man,
did you have a couple of muskets before you could go?
I had a couple after. Did you notice there's no musket this time? But by next week, that'll have dropped away. So
just get yourself a different glass, mate. One that isn't going to tip over so easily.
Yeah, maybe a tumbler. Yeah, well, I mean, we live and learn, don't we, mate?
Yeah, we do live and learn, my brother. We do live and learn.
So, anyway, so what's the upshot of this? Okay, so I killed my laptop. It was still partly working, but I had some early signs of failure, and it was going to get worse. So I went down to the Harvey Normans and I bought another one. And I bought exactly the same laptop, and I bought it from exactly the same shop. 5 months apart. Now, pity this didn't happen to me 5 months ago before I bought my new laptop, but so over a 5-month period, here's my Harvey Norman laptop index. So the one which I just destroyed, which cost me $2,000 5 months ago, and that's a lot of money, but I bought a small but very high memory laptop with the idea that it'll last me. Anyway, when I killed it, I managed to buy exactly the same thing 5 months later, and it cost me an extra $150.
Oh, wow. Bloody hell. You'd think with stuff
So
like that, it would go down like it's average.
Same laptop, same shop, etc. And what we talk about is, we expect laptops to go down in price over time. That's called hedonic adjustment. So things over time, technology gets cheaper over time, so you should pay less for it. Now, despite that, I had to pay more for it. Exactly the same thing bought from exactly the same shop cost me 7.5% more. And if I annualize that from 5 months out to 12 months, that's an 18% price rise. So my Harvey Norman laptop index says that technology is going up at 18%. Gold was 11. Splices were what? I think that was 10. Laptops are 18%. And groceries are 11%. So this story during the week from Yahoo said that the average family basket of groceries went up 11% during the year. So I've just shown you a whole lot of examples, and these are not cherry-picked. These are things that you and I buy. I do buy gold. I do buy laptops. I don't buy ice creams anymore, but I know the prices.
Don't know what you're missing.
And so that says that the real inflation rate for every single one of the four markers I've just told you, it says that it is 10, 11% a year. But the government tells us it's 2 to 3%, which is bad enough because, as I've shown, that'll steal half the value of your money over I think it's 23 years.
Bloody hell.
But if it's the real 10%, that's going to steal half the value of your money every 7 years.
Yep, that's pretty scary. It's pretty scary stuff, that, mate. Pretty scary stuff. And I noticed that we've got a few drinkers in our chat, Bruce, because Carla's probably speaking from experience, and she's saying, let's just hook up an IV drip, Bruce, and Gail's come up and said you may need a sippy cup, Dr. Bruce. I know that's Gail's experience with having a couple of drinks, and put a teat on your musket bottle there. From Jason. So we've got some people with experience and maybe have had some of their own little accidents along the way, Bruce.
I feel like such a fool, and I do remember back when my kids were much younger, and you'd give them a cup or a drink of something, and they'd put it down on the couch, and you just look at it, and you know that kid's going to turn around and knock that off, and the kids they're clueless, they have no idea.
After a couple of muskets, someone else becomes a bit clueless.
So I am bearing my soul for the benefit of others.
There you go. Good on you, mate. Good on you. Took one for the team. Good on you. And you're the driver. I'm the co-pilot. You're the driver. Bloody hell, there's no hope for us there, is it?
Oh dear. All righty. Anyway, okay. What's in summary? What's the point I'm making here? For the last 55 years, the governments have taken over the job of managing our money. And they've stuffed it up. And they've stuffed it up because governments can't manage anything, let alone the single most important thing, which is money. Because one of the jobs of the Reserve Bank is to keep prices stable. Well, prices have 20x'd in my lifetime, so it ain't stable. And that's just by official stats. That's just if you take your inflation rate, as to what they say. If you look at the real inflation rate, there's no value left in the money whatsoever. And that was the money that the government took over to manage, remember?
Yep. Yep.
All right. Anyway, rant over.